The House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll. You may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our guest chaplain, Father Mike Liker, St. Peter and Paul Catholic Church, Clay Center, Kansas, guest of Representative Bloom, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Representative Pickard.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us to this day and the many blessings you bestow upon us. We ask that you send your Spirit upon these representatives of this great state of Kansas and inspire them to work for the people they represent. We also ask that you bless our fields, crops, and livestock with good weather, that they will produce much fruit to share with the rest of the world. Show your love and mercy to those struggling to make ends meet, those around the world who have experienced tragedy from fires, natural disasters, the recent air accidents, and those suffering from every disease and illness. Bless their caregivers and the relief workers who are instruments of peace and comfort. Bless our military, law enforcement, and first responders, that they may return safely home. We take a moment of silence to add our own personal intentions. We ask all of this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Has every member had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
HB 2268 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, requested by Representative W. Carpenter, an act concerning wildlife. HB 2269 by Committee on Elections, requested by Representative Haskins, an act concerning elections. HB 2270 by Committee on Legislative Modernization, requested by Representative Penn, an act concerning information technology. HB 2271 by Committee on Legislative Modernization, requested by Representative Penn, an act concerning cybersecurity. HB 2272 by Representative Schreiber, Ballard, and others, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure. HB 2273 by Committee on Veterans and Military, requested by Rob Leicht on behalf of the Kansas Office of Veterans Services, an act concerning veterans and military. HB 2274 by Committee on Veterans and Military, requested by Representative Thompson, an act concerning occupational licensing. HB 2275 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Representative Pishney on behalf of Finney County, an act concerning sales and compensating use tax. HB 2276 by Committee on Taxation, requested by Representative Hoheisel on behalf of Catalyst, an act concerning income taxation. HB 2277 by Representatives Sawyer, Clayton, and Corbett, an act concerning sales and compensating use tax. HB 2278 by Representatives Woodard, Amix, and others, an act concerning property taxation. HB 2279 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, requested by Representative W. Carpenter, an act concerning rules and regulations. HB 2280 by Committee on Federal and State Affairs, requested by Sean Gatewood on behalf of Sunflower Consulting, an act concerning health and healthcare. HB 2281 by Committee on Financial Institutions and Pensions, requested by Representative Hoheisel on behalf of the 2024 Special Committee on Centralized Pooled Collateral and PMIB Modernization, an act concerning public monies. HB 2282 by Committee on Financial Institutions and Pensions, requested by Representative Hoheisel, an act concerning real property. HB 2283 by Representatives Wagner, Swart, Feiger, and others, an act concerning the Kansas State Fair Board.
House Bill 2181 is withdrawn from the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice and referred to the Committee on Judiciary. The body will stand at ease. Members will not be in the aisle. The House will come to order. Introduction of original motions and House resolutions. The clerk will read.
H.R. 6006 by Representatives Poskins, Brownlee, Page, and others, a resolution designating February 5th, 2025 as Early Childhood Advocacy Day and recognizing the parents, child care providers, home visitors, healthcare workers, and all early childhood professionals who support young children in the most critical period of development in their lives.
On H.R. 6006, the Speaker recognizes Representative Poskin for a motion to adopt the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and body. Thank you for your patience on that. We've been working on this for quite a long time, and it really is important, so thank you for that. Come on up. Colleagues, I have an inspiring fact for you. By the time we finish this Kansas legislative biennium, 70,000 babies will have been born in Kansas. Those littlest Kansans will be in the midst of the most important period of development in their lives. This is a unique time in which the brain is being wired at an astonishing rate of nearly 1 million new neural connections per second. 1 million per second. That's why, as a mom of 7, I've been so active in the Early Childhood Caucus since I stepped into this building. Widely accepted findings from decades of brain science research provide compelling evidence that relationships with caregivers, experiences in early life, and environmental exposure significantly influence the well-being of our children. The brains we develop as young children are the same brains we take with us into adulthood. What happens to us as children has consequences for physical and mental health, future relationships, and our ability to work and engage with our Kansas communities. These facts guide the work of thousands of parents, child care providers, home visitors, healthcare providers, and early childhood development professionals who care for Kansas children. And today, nearly 200 of them are in the State House for Early Childhood Advocacy Day. Up here with me today are, and if you'll raise your hands, Jen Pishney with the Kansas Child Care Training Opportunities, Anel Harmon and Harmon Family Child Care, Angie Carnes, Child Care Provider Coalition of Kansas, Heather Schroepberger, Kansas Head Start Association, Gail Kozad, Kansas Children's Service League, Paula Neth with the Family Conservancy, Christy Smith, Child Care Aware of Kansas, and last but certainly not least, Tanya Bullock with Child Start. All are members of the Partnership for Early Success, a coalition of early childhood organizations, local chambers of commerce, and other advocates working to strengthen the early childhood system in Kansas. They are here to make sure we understand how important it is to invest in young children, to invest in child care providers, to invest in evidence-based home visiting programs, and to invest in our parents. They hope you will feel their passion for the work they do every day, despite low wages and long hours. Many of you will have the opportunity to meet with these advocates one-on-one today, but in case you don't get that opportunity, they wanted me to remind you of some simple facts about the science of early childhood development. Number 1, just like a house, our brains require a solid foundation and wiring to support all future development and learning. Genes and life experiences shape the wiring of the brain, which means there isn't a question anymore of whether it's nature versus nurture. It is both. 2, responsive, caring, and supportive relationships between a child and their caregiver are essential to building a strong brain. Number 3, sturdy brain architecture and support from caring adults leads to the development of executive function skills. Executive function skills help us to prioritize, juggle multiple tasks, organize, and focus. Remember, you got these brains when you were a child. These skills, as well as an ability to self-regulate, are critical to healthy development well into young adulthood. Number 4, excessive stress and lack of positive relationships can derail healthy development. And 5, if a child does not have safe, stable, and supportive caregivers and environments, then the stress response can be long-lasting and extreme. We call this toxic stress because it damages the developing brain and can have lifelong consequences. Please, colleagues, keep these simple truths in mind as you go about your work in the legislature. Regardless of your committee assignments, you are going to be making decisions that impact young children in Kansas because so many factors contribute to their development: transportation, agriculture, tax, appropriations, insurance, child welfare, health. All of these committees matter to our Kansas children. As I close, please join me in thanking early child professionals in the gallery, in the building, and around the state who cannot be here today. Their work is essential to creating a state where every child can grow up healthy and thrive and live up to the promise of the Sunflower State. Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of House Resolution HR 6006.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Representative, would you like your words spread across the journal?
Mr. Speaker, I ask that my words be spread across the journal. Thank you.
Without objection, so ordered. House Bill 2044 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it'll remain on the consent calendar for the second day. House Bill 2045 appears on the consent calendar for the first day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it'll remain on the consent calendar for the second day. House Bill 2048 appears on the consent calendar for the third day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it'll be advanced to final action. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions, the clerk will read.
HB 2048 by Committee on Insurance, an act concerning insurance relating to the powers, duties, and responsibilities of the Commissioner, eliminating the requirement that the Commissioner submit certain reports to the Governor, removing certain specific entities from the definition of person for the purpose of enforcing insurance law.
Members will be in their seats. This constitutes final action on House Bill 2048. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Alcala votes no. Representative Carr votes no. Any further changes? Seeing none, with 105 having voted in favor and 12 against the passage of House Bill 2048, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, clerk will read.
HCR 5004 by Proctor, Auer, Kent, and others, a proposition to amend Section 1 of Article 5 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas to require individuals to be citizens of the United States at least 18 years of age and a resident of the voting area in which such person seeks to vote in order to vote in this state.
This constitutes final action on HCR 5004. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? For an explanation, the speaker recognizes Representative Hoy.
Mr. Speaker, I vote no on HCR 5004. This constitutional amendment might make sense to my constituents and me at face value. It might seem harmless in the Kansas political atmosphere to reiterate that citizenship is a requirement to vote. But when the headlines read, "The White House begins migrant flights to Guantanamo Bay," I worry that this ballot measure will be used to send antagonistic messages about immigrants in the next election cycle. Kansans must stand against rhetoric that we know puts immigrants in danger. Given that this amendment isn't really needed and tensions are already high among immigrant communities, I vote no.
Are there any further explanations? The Speaker recognizes Representative McDonald.
Thank you. I vote no on HCR 5004. This is not a good use of taxpayer dollars. It comes with a $50,000 price tag that would change nothing. It's already very clear that only American citizens are able to vote. This is political grandstanding, and I will not be a part of this political theater.
Any further explanation of votes? Seeing none, does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Curtis votes no. Any further changes? Seeing none, with 90 having voted in favor and 28 against the passage of HCR 5004, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The Speaker recognizes Majority Leader Croft for a motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of General Orders.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The Speaker appoints Representative Hoffman to chair the Committee of the Whole.
All right, good morning, everybody. First order of business today is House Bill 2020. For the purposes of carrying House Bill 2020, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise before the body to present House Bill 2020. What this bill does is codify something that's been happening episodically over the last 15 years. About 6 times over the last 15 years, the Secretary of State's office has been able to get the Department of Revenue Vehicle Division to send them a list of non-citizens who have driver's licenses, and then compare that list to the voter rolls to identify non-citizens and remove them from the voter rolls. A lot of folks don't know this, but while Kansas is a real ID state, you don't have to be a citizen to get a real ID. When you go to the DMV, if you are not a citizen, you just have to present proof of who you are, such as your passport from whatever country you are a citizen of, and proof that you are a legal resident of the United States, either showing your alien registration card, your green card, or showing documentation that you have refugee status through the CBP-1 app that was used by the last administration or whatever. You can get a driver's license. Also, like every state in the union now, because of the National Voter Registration Act, Kansas is a motor voter state. At the DMV, they ask you, do you want to register to vote? And so it is possible that an inattentive, overworked worker there at the DMV, or a non-citizen who's not paying attention or has trouble with English might accidentally get registered to vote at the DMV. And that's why the Secretary of State's, successive Secretary of States, have asked the DMV to provide a list of non-citizens with driver's licenses to compare to our voter rolls, just to spot those folks. This is not a hypothetical thing that might happen. The last time that the Secretary of State's office got this data was in November, and they've identified as many as 80 people who are, might be non-citizens that they're investigating to get them off the voter rolls. And 20 of those people, there's evidence that they voted in the last election. So this is just a common sense way to make sure and be able to tell Kansans, no, non-citizens are not voting in our state by checking and removing them from the voter rolls. What this bill would do would regularize that process that's happened episodically. Quarterly, the DMV would provide a list of non-citizens who had applied for driver's licenses recently to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State would be required to investigate, because there's more than one John Smith in the state of Kansas. They'd have to investigate to make sure that that person is the same person who's on the voter rolls. The DMV would be providing the name, the address, the social security number if the non-citizen has one, the alien registration number if the non-citizen has one, to the Secretary of State with the birth date, so that they could compare and make sure that they've got the right person when they're on the voter rolls. The Secretary of State would then be required to tell the county election officer to remove that person from the voter rolls. Because the Secretary of State doesn't have the ability to add or remove people from the voter rolls. The software only allows the county election officers to do that. The county election officer, when notified, would have 5 days to remove that person and notify that person that they have been removed. And I think that's the most important point that I want to leave you with before I stand for questions. There is due process built into this bill. The voter will be notified that they're being removed, and they can go to the election office with their proof of citizenship, and they will be added back to the voter list. You know, maybe they weren't a citizen when they got their driver's license, but they've since become naturalized. They can just bring that certificate of naturalization to the election officer. They'll be put back on the voter rolls. If all else fails and that voter didn't receive the notice or didn't pay attention to the notice, they can vote a provisional ballot on election day at their polling place, and then they will have until the canvass 2 weeks later to provide proof that they're a citizen so that their vote will be counted. There's tons of due process in this bill. So, body, I urge your support of this bill, and I'll stand for questions.
To speak on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Orpeza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chairman, I have a question for the bringer of the bill. Hi. So my question is who else would have access to this list?
So this is data that the DMV already collects and keeps in its own database, and they would be sending that data only to the Secretary of State's office. And so the Secretary of State would have access to that data.
Okay, and then my second question is, when you talked about if citizens are taken off the list, they have to personally come back in and straighten out the paperwork and potentially miss votes and their rights to vote here in the state of Kansas. Is there any way to avoid that before taking people off the list?
Like I said, even if they don't bring the paperwork in before the election, I don't know why they would miss a vote, because they can vote a provisional ballot at the polling place. It's federal law that we have to provide a person a provisional ballot if they believe that they have been wrongly removed from the voter rolls. And then they would have 2 weeks after that to fix whatever misunderstanding there was if they were a citizen and able to vote.
I have an additional question to follow up on that. Are the citizens going to be compensated for their time and effort and being off of work and running around?
Okay, we're talking about the hypothetical situation.
I understand
where
that.
a person was a citizen and was wrongly removed from the ballot. I don't think that's going to occur, because when the DMV collects this data, they scan in all of these documents. So they've got, electronic versions of the documentation for that person to show that they're a non-citizen. So I think that this would be such a rare, inconceivably rare case that, no, it's not contemplated in this bill.
Okay, thank you very much for answering my questions. I do want to address this bill, House Bill 2020, in regards to the fact that it is a list. It's a list that says it will be gained or gathered by the DMV and then taken to the Secretary of State. There have been lists in our past and actually most recent in looking at this, and this is where I really wish I'd paid attention more in history class so I could speak more intelligent about the history that has happened in our past here in the United States. In saying that, recently we had gang lists, which are found to be unconstitutional. We have had the Page Act. We have had the Scott Act. Granted, you'll look at these and you'll say that was 1880-something, but at the same time, I've had people up here talk about 1890s and additionally in that regard as well. So in saying that, I really have some concerns about gathering lists on people, lists on that are being passed around here at the state and within our area here in Kansas. So I just want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence with these lists. So I do have a few amendments, and I apologize, I did not turn these in, so I will do that now. Thank you.
Just a reminder, if you have an amendment, please turn it in beforehand so it doesn't slow us down. Thank you.
My apologies again to the House. I do apologize about that. I did not have wrong intentions in not getting this done, but I wanted to make sure the lists are being used appropriately. As they've been stated, they will be used. And so with that, I bring my First Amendment.
The amendment appears relatively short. The clerk will read.
HB 2020 as amended by House on page 1 in line 7 before B by inserting A, following line 19 by inserting B, any person identified in any report submitted pursuant to subsection A who is of any of such person's information that was included in such report disclosed to any person other than as expressly authorized by the state or federal law shall have a cause of action and may seek damages, including statutory damages in an amount of $100,000 and other equitable relief. In any action brought pursuant to this subsection, the court may award the plaintiff costs of the litigation, including court costs and reasonable attorney fees. Also on page 1 in the title in line 3 after the semicolon by inserting providing a cause of action for unlawful disclosure of information contained in such reports.
Representative, would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. So as we talked about the history lesson, in which I had wished I'd paid more attention, we have had these lists in the past. I want to ensure that we are using these lists as intended by this bill, House Bill 2020. I want to ensure if these lists are used in any other way, that those who are using this list are held accountable. And we need to do that to make sure that we have accountability throughout the entire state. And I will stand for questions if anybody has any in regards to my amendment.
To speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I believe that the bringer of the amendment is well-intentioned, I'm going to ask the body to vote against this amendment. I consider it an unfriendly amendment. This data is already held by our state government. And so I'm a little bit confused about why we have to add this cause of action to this bill when they're holding it right now, and it's no less vulnerable. It's no less vulnerable now than it would be if it was shared with Secretary of State's office. So I'm going to ask that you oppose this amendment.
Further speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Carlin.
Oh, I'm sorry. Years ago, when we started talking about getting driver's license for non-citizens, it was the Highway Patrol who made the big argument in favor of them having a driver's license.
Please continue.
Because in an accident or a death on the highway, they have to be able to identify persons. And when non-citizens were not getting driver's license, that was a problem for them. So the reason I came down is because I like the amendment because it tightens it up, but it doesn't discourage people from asking for that voter ID or that driver's license that shows who they are, where they live, so they can be taken care of in the event even if they're just arrested. We have to know who people are. So I think it's a good amendment. It would serve everybody well. I could support the bill with such an amendment, and I would ask your support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Body, if we could make sure that our sidebar conversations are held quietly, please. Further speak on the amendment, chair recognizes Representative Susan Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to speak to this, but I heard the carrier of the bill say, why now? And that this information is no less vulnerable now than it has been. I'm going to contradict that and say that this information is much more vulnerable now, given the fact that there is targeting of mass deportations of immigrants. And the recent event of a citizen of South Africa who has taken over the information that contains all of our social securities, has all of our addresses. He's got control of all really, really sensitive information that should freak the hell out of every one of us. The citizen of South Africa, he's not a U.S. citizen, and God knows who else he has in there controlling this information. And everyone in this country should be outraged about that. So that's why this information now is much more vulnerable than it ever has been. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on the amendment. Chair recognizes Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the carrier of the amendment please stand for question?
Yes, sir. How can I help you?
If I understand correctly, this amendment would provide certain measures that would, in effect, punish those that abuse this particular bill. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Would you have instance of any other bills that we have passed in this body that punishes those that abuse the bill?
Yes, we recently passed Senate Bill 63.
Thank you very much. Body, I would say that this is no different than that Senate bill that we passed out of this legislature just days ago. In the event that you don't do as the law requires, there should be some sort of repercussions, because there will be people who will be punished by that. And as we spoke when we all came and testified with respect to Senate Bill 63, there's this thing called accountability. And in fact, that's what this is. This holds people accountable. And so I'll be voting in support of this amendment, and I hope you will vote as you voted just several days ago in support of Senate Bill 63 and those punishments, for lack of a better word. I would hope that you vote along with me. Thank you.
Let's remember to keep our discussion on this bill and not on other bills, please. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Lopez, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really do appreciate the fact that I've been given time to discuss this, and I really appreciate the comments that have been made. And the fact, and I want to emphasize that this does tighten things up, as well as presents us with accountability and ensuring those that are on this list are truly treated in which the fashion in which the base bill is intended for. Thank you. I close my amendment.
You've heard the motion by Representative Opeza to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Those appear to have it. Division's been called. The clerk will open the vote. Seeing 15 hands, this is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Seeing none, yeas being 31, nays 85, the amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Representative Opeza, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said before, I do have a couple of amendments. So this next amendment, again, is just to ensure accountability and to tighten things up. In addition to that, I want to go ahead and submit that amendment.
Again, the amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 1 in line 7, before the by inserting A, following line 19 by inserting B, it shall be a violation of this section to disclose the information of any person identified in any report submitted pursuant to subsection A to any person other than as expressly authorized by state or federal law. A violation of this section is a severity level 5 non-person felony. Also on page 1 in the title in line 3, after the semicolon, by inserting making it a violation to disclose information contained in such report except as permitted under state or federal law and providing penalties therefor.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will certainly do that. So in addition to this, what I wanted to specifically do to this, because there are laws that are already in the state books and on record, but they're considered to be probation and very low. But with this actual severity level 5, we're looking at jail time. I really just want to make sure I send a message to ensure that people are holding accountability and that they will not be frivolous in this information, and making sure that they are doing what it's intended to be done with it. And I want to make sure that those people who are on this list are protected as much as possible.
To speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, while I believe the bringer of the amendment is well-intentioned, there's already tons of civil and criminal penalties for misuse of protected and private information. So I'm going to ask the body to vote this down as an unfriendly amendment.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just really hope that everybody can appreciate this amendment and truly come with me on this. I really think that we have brought issues to this floor that have increased severity and have increased jail time when in fact there was no jail time in the first instance. So I really want to make sure that we hold that accountability to all fashions of what happens on this floor and under this dome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close my amendment.
Heard the motion by Representative Oropesa to amend. All those in favor say aye. Those no. Those appear to have it. Division's been called. Roll call vote has been called for. Seeing 15 hands, this is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Yeah. Representative Rosner votes no. Rosner, sorry. Representative Hubert, where's he at? Representative Howe votes no. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, the yeas being 31, nays 86, the amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Representative, you still have the floor.
Mr. Chair, now with this amendment, and I will do a little preferencing, I'm worried about citizens that may be caught up on this list, having to take that time off to work, having to jump through additional hoops after they have already done everything they needed to do within the immigration process that we have already in line in the United States. So I wanted to make sure when I asked those questions earlier of the bringer of the bill, that who pays for that time? Who does that? People have to work. People have children. People need to take time off. They need to find their documentation again, stand in those lines. It's very, can be very cumbersome, and it could not be a potentially fast process. And yes, we were talking about hypotheticals, but I want to make sure those people who are citizens, who have done all the appropriate paperwork and potentially may be caught up in this, have some type of accountability for that time or can be reimbursed for that time in some way. So I do have an amendment.
Again, yeah, it appears short. Clerk will read.
On page 1 in line 7 before the by inserting A, following line 19 by inserting B, it shall be a violation of this section to include any individual who is a citizen of the United States in any report submitted pursuant to subsection A. Any person who violates this subsection shall be subject to a fine of not more than $100,000. C, any person who is a citizen of the United States and is included in any report submitted pursuant to subsection A shall have a cause of action and may seek damages or other equitable relief. In any action brought pursuant to this subsection, the court may award the plaintiff costs of the litigation, including court costs and reasonable attorney fees. Also on page 1 in the title in line 3, after the semicolon by inserting providing penalties and a cause of action for the inclusion of a citizen in such report.
Representative, would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, I will go into further detail. So as we look at voter registration and as we look at things, I wanted to ensure that people who do work with these lists and look at these lists and go through the database are truly removing people who are non-citizens and who do not have the right to vote. That is my incomplete and entire intent, is to ensure that they are doing a thorough job and to ensure that they have exhausted every practice to ensure that we are not removing citizens who are able to vote off of these lists. That is my intent of this amendment, and I hope you share my belief in that we should making sure that everybody who can vote should vote and should not be removed.
To speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the bringer of the amendment's intent, but what this amendment actually does is create a fine of $100,000. So your county election clerk makes a accidental mistake, well-intentioned, makes a mistake, they're on the hook for $100,000 because they clicked the wrong button on a computer. I think that that's excessive, and I think that these folks are already worked hard enough and harried hard enough trying to run our elections. They don't need the cloud of a $100,000 fine hanging over their head. So I'm going to ask you to vote against this amendment as unfriendly.
Anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Oropesa, you may close.
The bringer of the bill did make some comments. I just want to make sure that's clarified. This is not a, shall be subject to a fine not more than $100,000. So this is somebody who could potentially be taken off the list, and I just want to make sure that we are ensuring that we are doing our due diligence when we look at these lists, that we do not become a part of history, that we look back and say, ooh, why did we do that? I just want to make sure that is very much looked at and to make sure that everybody is held accountable, and I want to make sure there is some type of potential cause of action for those citizens who could potentially be taken off the voter roll. Thank you. I close my amendment.
Heard the motion by Representative Oropesa to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Noes appear to have it. Division's been called. Roll call's been called. The clerk will open the vote. This is a roll call vote. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Representative Potter Parshaw votes no. Does anyone else wish to change their vote? Representative Will Carpenter votes no. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, the yeas being 29, nays 86, the amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Representative Oropesa, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me the time to explain of wanting to ensure that the intent was very much here within this bill and that we kept on the straight and narrow and tightened everything up. I do appreciate that. Going forward, unfortunately, without these amendments, I will not be able to vote for this bill in good conscience. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Potter Parshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, first of all, I'd like to thank the carrier of this bill for introducing it, or I believe he was the one who introduced it, but for the Elections Committee to take it up and work through it. As someone who has the experience of working in the Elections Division in the Secretary of State's office, there are a couple little things within it that I was concerned about. So I created an amendment and so I move to amend HB 2020.
Let's hold back a second there. It appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 1, in line 7, before the first "the" by inserting "on or before September 1st, 2025." In line 8, after licenses by inserting "and non-drivers identification cards." In line 9, by striking "quarterly," and forward this list. In line 11, by striking "temporary." In line 12, after "numbers," by inserting "non-drivers identification card numbers." Also in line 12, after licenses, by inserting "and cards." Copies of any documentation proving lawful resident status shall be provided along with the list. Each quarter thereafter, the director shall provide a list of such licenses and cards that have since been issued or renewed that includes the same information along with the required documentation. All information shall be sent through a secure communication as agreed to by the director and the secretary. On page 6, in line 36, by striking "a." In line 37, by striking "all" before "to" and inserting "reports." On page 1, in the title, in line 2, by striking "making quarterly" and inserting "provide."
Representative, would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, thank you. So this would require the director of the DMV to submit the information and documentation that whenever you go and apply for the license, that they capture. So the images of your documentation, of legal status. And then it would require the full list to be sent by September 1st and then quarterly thereafter. And it would amend it to allow all driver's licenses and all non-driver's licenses. So if you just have an ID for where you aren't driving, but you need to have the proof that you, let's see, you go use your credit card and they ask for your ID. And I think that is pretty much, oh, then also the secure. It requires the secure transfer of the information back and forth because there have been incidences where in the past there's been information that's been accidentally sent unsecurely. So I wanted to ensure that since my mom will be on this list, that it is transferred securely. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Chair recognizes Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the carrier of the amendment stand for a question?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Can you clarify a little bit on this? It's a little lengthy. You've stricken the quarterly requirement of sending this report. Is that correct?
That's incorrect. It includes the quarterly going forward, but it also includes all those who have that are currently have driver's licenses or non-driver's licenses that are non-citizens.
Okay, thank you. So this includes not just temporary driver's license, this is all driver's license, correct?
From my understanding, after speaking with the revisor, this would include temporary driver's licenses, non-driver's licenses, motor driver's licenses, motorcycle driver's licenses, everything on the list that would require you as a citizen or non-citizen to obtain photo identification through the DMV.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Fellow colleagues, it's just, and I do apologize to the chair, something about my speaker button wasn't working. Just a point of clarification that this bill was brought forth by the Secretary of State's office, and the bill limited to temporary driver's license only. Right now, it's a complete holistic, according to the amendment, and it completely changes what the Secretary of State administratively requested. So I would encourage you to not support this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's actually some goodness in this. I'd like to work with the bringer of the amendment before this bill goes over to the Senate, should the body pass it. Because I do think that adding the state IDs to the list of IDs would be a positive change. However, there's some other things in here that I think require some more discussion. So I'd like to ask the body to oppose this amendment And I'll work with the carrier of the amendment to try to get some of this language into the bill over in the Senate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion? Chair recognizes Representative Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for the bringer of the amendment, if that's okay. So would this include state IDs for people under the age of 18 who are not even voting age yet?
I do not have a specific answer, but since they would be driver's licenses also, I would assume so, but I could be incorrect, but the original bill would have done the same thing. Because it would include driver's licenses, you can get your driver's license as early as 16.
My understanding was that the original bill only included individuals who are of voting age. And that's where my concern is, I think, especially with this amendment, but broader, if I'm wrong about that with the bill itself. But, you know, I think to myself, well, if my child who's not of voting age goes to get a state ID or a driver's license at the age of 15 or 16, I would not want that information kept in a list available to anyone, whether it's secure or not, outside of the DMV and the permissions that are already granted in their list keeping. So I would be strongly opposed to this amendment, especially because of my concerns about how this list is going to be used in the future. Our previous concerns mentioned by other speakers, and the fact that this seems like gross overreach, especially for those who are not eligible to vote. And this is intended to be for voting purposes. Thank you.
Further discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Susan Urice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the carrier of the amendment. My question is, we have a physical note on the bill. How would your amendment change the fiscal note?
That is a great question, and one I do not have the answer to, but I believe that this has already been a process that's been occurring between the DMV and the Secretary of State's office, so they probably already have at least the temporary list, but I understand the fiscal note could be an issue.
Well, in general, I'm opposed to the amendment, but I think this really questions, we don't know what the fiscal note will look like with adding so many more licenses in the research here, so I will be opposing it. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
Let's see. While I understand there are some concerns, I think that this would clean up the bill quite a lot, and I move my amendment.
Heard the motion by Representative Potter Parshall to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Those appear to have it. Those do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the bill. Representative Parshall, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one additional amendment. This would simply require that the Secretary of State would provide a report to the legislature of how many citizens or the number of non-citizens who are registered to vote, the number of were taken off, and if any charges were filed. A yearly report.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 1 in line 7 before the by inserting A, following line 19 by inserting B, or before January 15, 2026, and each January 15th thereafter, the Secretary of State shall submit a report on non-citizens who are registered to vote to the legislature. Such report shall include the number of non-citizens who are registered to vote, the number of such non-citizens who voted in any election during the preceding year, and whether any criminal charges were filed against any such persons. Also on page 1 in the title in line 3, after the semicolon, by inserting requiring annual reports to the legislature on non-citizens registered to vote.
Would you like to further explain your amendment?
This would require a report to the legislator yearly, and when it comes to legislation like this that could have a severe or minor impact, it's extremely important for us to be able to track that to see if it's actually significant or not. I'll stand for questions.
To speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I believe that the amendment is well-intentioned, we already talked to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State was a proponent on this bill. I don't think we need to make that relationship antagonistic. I think that we're going to get this data. I don't think we need to put it in law to get it. We've got a great working relationship with Secretary of State's office, and so I'm going to ask the body to oppose this amendment.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the carrier of the amendment please stand for question? I don't, it wasn't clear to me with relationship to the list. You mentioned on the list that there would also be an addendum that stated whether or not the individual had a criminal record. In the list is it a list of numbers or names and a number? I understood from the reading of the bill that they said that that the number would be brought to the legislature, but in that number is the name included and then the previous charge or offense that they had committed.
Thank you. What this amendment would do, it would simply send the number of citizen or non-citizens that were on the voter rolls, whether or not any of them voted, and if any criminal charges were brought. It would not necessarily include names. It would just be the simple statistics of what this bill has done and impacted the voter rolls.
So I'm assuming that, just for clarification, that there wouldn't be any names on the list, just a number.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. Body, I would just say that you vote your conscience on this one and let the cards fall where they may. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Haskins.
Thank you, colleagues. And on behalf to help out at least my caucus here, I just want to remind that this information can be requested by the KLRD, if so, and the Secretary of State has always been forthcoming as far as who they find. If we start mandating administrative reports to be sent to us, it opens up a Pandora's box. So we want to be conscientious. I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with sending the list, because I know that the answer will be 0 because that's been demonstrated yesterday. However, I just encourage you to vote your district on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you may close.
See, I close on this amendment.
You've heard the motion by Representative Potter Paschal to amend. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Those appear to have it. Those do have it. Motion fails. We're back on the bill. Representative, you still have the floor.
Okay. So I just want to clarify that the base of this bill is actually pretty good. From working in the Secretary of State's office, going through the cross-check and knowing firsthand that it's not just simply, oh, this name matches, this name matches, then they must have committed some kind of fraud or criminal intention. That's not how it works. You have to match the names, you match the date of birth, you match the signature. There's so much that goes into it. And then once you have everything matched, then you actually investigate to make sure that that person is correctly on the list. So while I would like to see changes, especially on the first amendment that I brought, and especially when it comes to security of transferring the information, I support the base of this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Haskins.
Thank you, colleagues, for the opportunity to talk and to visit a little bit about this. I want to provide a little clarification on this, that this, not to discredit any of the possible issues of accountability as well as the harmfulness as we focus on non-citizens. I wanted to bring up the focus back onto how this is more of an administrative function. They're asking us to codify an administrative practice that they have an agreement, but the Secretary of State's office says that they don't get the reports every time. And they do have a process. The Secretary of State does have a process to thoroughly vet. My colleague, the chair of the committee, brought up yesterday about the 100,000 and brought up today about the 80 individuals identified. In that same testimony, the state election director, Kasky, and if you ever have the opportunity to listen to him, he is very passionate, 34-year veteran of the state Secretary of State's office, stated that they were confident that the 80 will eventually become 0, that they take their job extremely thorough. And that overall is my point, is Topeka is largely a state government employment town, very proud of those that work. And we want to keep in mind that even though the Secretary of State is appointed by the voters, there are career Secretary of State employees such as Mr. Kasky. And so I did ask Mr. Kasky, you know, knowing that I really do believe, honestly, that he takes pride in his job. I was like, can you guarantee that you will be at that job? Well, as long as my great-grandchildren are able to vote. And he said, no. So I asked the Secretary of State himself, he was out in the rotunda, and he said, yes, Kirk, it is humanly impossible for him to live until my grandchildren are there. So, but he did offer an amendment, and I have it, so bear with me. I think you'll like it.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
On page 1 in line 7, before the by inserting A, following line 19 by inserting B, the provisions of this section shall expire on July 1st, 2027. On page 6, following line 39 by inserting 1, the amendments to this section by this act shall expire on July 1st, 2027. On page 1, in the title, in line 3, after the semicolon, by inserting, providing for the expiration of such provisions on July 1st, 2027.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
I sure would. Thank you so much. So overall, there are 3 general concerns about this. First, the one is privacy concerns. And now we're adding alien registration numbers to that. Now, whether we recognize it or not, there have been breaches in Secretary of State's office. In 2019, you had one in Texas in which 95,000 possible non-citizens were identified as not eligible to vote, and which 1,000 of those were actually falsely flagged. And that led to prosecution or court cases related to voter suppression. In 2021, the Department of Motor Vehicle in California was hacked, and it received a breach of 38 million privacy data. So I know everybody's in agreement that we need to protect Kansans' privacy. So, but we are adding a new number, and it's time for us to take a little look at that. And there is a potential of risk of error that I've already illustrated. And finally, the last thing is that, you know, the Brennan Center of Justice did state in 2020 that if you focus on non-citizen voters, just bring up the question, then those who are legal immigrants will hesitate to participate in the community. And they are, with an agricultural economy as we have, the backbone of our Kansas economy. So those are issues. But again, Mr. Kasky can't live until, you know, my great-grandchildren are there. And I really believe that the administrative responsibility of data purge is effective that they have. So the Secretary of State, when I was talking to him, he said, here, I will agree to, if you allow us to do it for 24 months, have it sunset, and then give the next Secretary of State an opportunity to review that, that will at least demonstrate to them the opportunity to try this out. And also, it doesn't overreach the legislative responsibility of codifying administrative work. They have an agreement. So what they're asking is, can we really, can we enforce that and have them work together? The other aspect of the bill that you need to keep in mind, that if they don't submit the quarterly report, or if the election clerk doesn't clean the voter registration in 5 days, there's no accountability. There's nothing there. It's not like it's just, this is what we request. So it's really just more of a guideline than a directive. So I hope that you consider my amendment and move it favorably.
To speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, while I believe this amendment's well-intentioned, I think it's ill-advised. We don't have to try this out to see if it works. We've been trying this out for 15 years. This process has been occurring episodically 6 times over the last 15 years with the current Secretary of State, the Secretary of State before him, and the Secretary of State before him. And we've had no issues, no abuses with it. So a good idea is either a good idea or it isn't. You don't put a time limit on a good idea. So I'd ask the body to vote this amendment down as unfriendly.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Haskins, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just in closing comments, I do find it interesting that the Secretary of State's the one that recommended the 24 months. So I don't know how the Secretary of State of the majority side is unfriendly, but we have that down. I will also say that, again, this is an administrative responsibility. It's not a legislative responsibility. This gives us to be a good steward and statesman to the citizens of Kansas. So let's give it a try, 24 months, and come back and visit. I close and move my amendment.
Heard the motion by Representative Haskins to amend. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Noes appear to have it. Division's been called. Roll call. This 15 hands. This is a roll call vote. The clerk will open the roll. Has everyone had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Representative Droege votes no. Anyone else wish to change their vote? Representative Hawkins votes no. Anyone else wish to change their vote? Seeing none, 30 voting for, 85 against. The motion fails. We are back on the bill. You still have the floor.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be just real quick. Man, you guys are tough, right? You guys are loyal and tough. Your own Secretary of State says this will be good. But like, nah, we know better. So good for you guys. Thank you. And I will be opposing this bill.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Poskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just, I do need to note that I have to bring up some other legislation to ask my question. So I appreciate the privilege of that. I do have a question for the carrier of the bill, please. Thank you, Representative. I really had no intent of asking a question today, but something that you said, followed up by something the ranking member said, really did, prompt this question. So we have had legislation before us before, and we'll probably look at it again, to eliminate the 3-day grace period on mail-in ballots. And my understanding is that one of the reasons for that is to have the election numbers stop changing, right? Like, so that what happens on the day happens on the day. But when we add this, we are going to be having those John Smiths who need to vote provisionally, and they have 14, that's going to be 14 days before their votes are counted. And I'm just wondering how you reconcile that, adding in uncertainty for 14 days for the John Smiths who are, hold up in this accidentally, versus allowing our college students and so forth to get their ballots in that they've cast before Election Day.
Representative, we're pretty far afield from this bill, but if, with the chair's indulgence, I will comment on the 3-day.
I mean, I guess my question is, how do you reconcile 3-day versus now adding the 14-day uncertainty?
I can't speak for the person who brought the bill in the Senate on repealing the 3-day. I'll tell you how I feel about it. We just got data from the Secretary of State on the primary election that 2% the mail-in ballots that were cast by Kansas voters had to be discarded because they showed up in the 3-day grace period, but they didn't have a postmark. That voter did everything right, that election officer did everything right, and because the post office didn't put a little stamp on the envelope, we are disenfranchising the thousands of Kansans. We don't have the numbers for the general elections, but it's probably going to be multiple thousands. That's why I believe that we should repeal the 3-day grace period. I can't speak to why other people believe that.
Okay, so my question though is, you're fine with doing that, but you're going to add the 14 days for our citizens that get caught up in this because it's 14 days before their provisional ballot. So a citizen who gets caught up in this whole database thing and has to vote provisionally, their vote won't be counted for 14 days.
Yep.
And that's okay.
I find no conflict between these two measures. And if you'll give me a moment, I'll explain why.
Thank you.
Both of these bills are about voters being confident that their vote is being counted and no invalid votes are being counted. That, in my mind, that's what this bill is about, and that's what the repeal of a 3-day grace period bill, should it come to this body, are about. I find no contradiction in those two things.
Okay. Thank you for your answer on that. I will not be supporting this bill, and I think there's just too many concerns for folks and getting their votes counted, so thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Proctor, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the debate and the civil discourse on this bill. I've heard several people on the other side say that the net result of this bill would be 0 non-citizens found on the voter rolls. I disagree, but let's for a moment imagine that that is the result of this bill. We scrub our voter rolls every quarter looking for non-citizens, and we do not find a non-citizen on the voter roll. That is a positive result because we can tell voters confidently that non-citizens are not voting in our elections because we checked. Right now, we are not regularly checking. We just checked in November. I have no idea how long it had been before that, but only 6 times in 15 years have we checked to see if people that we know are non-citizens because they got a driver's license with credentials showing that they're non-citizens, only 6 times have we checked to see if they're also on our voter rolls. So when we tell Kansans right now, non-citizens aren't voting in our state, we're lying because the fact is we don't really know because we're not checking that hard. This would allow us to tell the voters of Kansas with confidence, yes, your vote is being counted, and no invalid votes are being counted that would dilute your vote. So I urge the body to support this bill. And Mr. Chair, I move that when the body rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2020 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Proctor to report House Bill 2020 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. This does conclude our general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Mr. Chair, I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion to rise and report. All those in favor say aye. Those no. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of whole recommends that HB 2020 be passed as amended.
The speaker recognizes Representative Hoffman to adopt the committee of the whole report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion to adopt the committee report. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The committee report is adopted. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
The Committee on Higher Education Budget recommends HB 2120 be passed. The Committee on Judiciary recommends HB 2061 be amended and the bill be passed as amended.
Is there any objection to returning to that order of business, introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions? Seeing no objections, the clerk will read.
HB 2284 by Committee on Health and Human Services, requested by Representative W. Carpenter on behalf of the Robert G. B. Bethel Joint Committee on Home and Community-Based Services and Can Care Oversight, an act concerning the Department of Administration. HB 2285 by Committee on Health and Human Services, requested by Representative Oropeza on behalf of Representative Carr, an act concerning public health. HB 2286 by Committee on Health and Human Services, requested by Representative Rivas on behalf of the Kansas Dental Association, an act concerning insurance. HB 2287 by Committee on Welfare Reform, requested by Representative Owsley, an act concerning public assistance. HB 2288 by Committee on Transportation, requested by Tony Railsback on behalf of ABATE of Kansas, Inc., an act concerning motor vehicles. HB 2289 by Committee on Transportation, requested by Zach Denny on behalf of the Department of Revenue, an act concerning motor vehicles. HB 2290 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Representative Croft, an act concerning real property. HB 2291 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Representative Penn, an act creating the Regulatory Relief Division within the Office of the Attorney General. HB 2292 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Rachel Willis on behalf of the Department of Commerce, an act concerning the Star Bonds Financing Act. HB 2293 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Representative Croft, an act concerning infrastructure. HB 2294 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Representative L. Williams, an act concerning child care. HB 2295 by Committee on Education, requested by Representative Featherston on behalf of Representative Meyer, an act concerning education. HB 2296 by Representative Featherston, Alcala, and others, an act concerning insurance. HB 2297 by Committee on Agricultural and Natural Resources, requested by Representative Sywert, an act concerning animals. HB 2298 by Representatives Weigel and Helgerson, an act concerning state monies. HB 2299 by Committee on Education, requested by Representative Estes, an act concerning discrimination. HB 2300 by Committee on Judiciary, requested by Representative Barth, an act concerning the Kansas Consumer Protection Act. HB 2301 by Representative Riley, an act enacting the returning to non-accountability of the executive branch agencies that report to the Governor Act. HB 2302 by Representative Owsley, an act concerning children and minors. HB 2303 by Committee on K through 12 Education Budget, requested by Representative Getz, an act concerning the Legislature. HB 2304 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Representative Kay Williams, an act concerning economic development. HB 2305 by Committee on Health and Human Services, requested by Jeannie Godden on behalf of Kansas for Life, an act concerning abortion. HB 2306 by Committee on Judiciary, requested by Representative Tarwater on behalf of Kevin Corbin, Troy Hamlin, and Brent Maroney, an act concerning involuntary manslaughter. HB 2307 by Committee on Health and Human Services, requested by Representative Howell on behalf of Kansas for Life, an act concerning health and health care. HB 2308 by Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, requested by Rachel Willis on behalf of the Department of Commerce, an act concerning economic development. HB 2309 by Committee on Legislative Modernization, requested by Terry Lois Mashburn on behalf of the Register of Deeds of Leavenworth County, an act concerning the modernization of notarization and the County Register of Deeds process with respect to real estate documents. HCR 5010 by Representative Kay Williams, Bloom, and others, a concurrent resolution supporting the full authorization and funding of the Public Safety Autonomous Technologies Research, Testing, Certification, and Commercialization Program, and supporting the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2025.
Are there announcements? Representative Vaughn replaces Representative Nguyen on the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations on Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. This appointment will expire at the end of the day on February 5th. Representative Mosley replaces Representative Luis Ruiz on the House Committee on Education on Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. The appointment will expire at the end of the day. Representative Shu replaces Representative Schlingensiepen on the House Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications on Thursday, February the 6th, 2025. The appointment will expire at the end of the day on that day. Representative Hoffman replaces Representative Hubert on the House Committee on Education on February 5th and 6th. This appointment will expire at the end of the day on February the 6th. Representative Wilburn will replace Representative Tarwater on the House Committee on Elections. This appointment takes effect immediately and is permanent. Speaker recognizes Representative Stockstill.
Have agenda tomorrow morning, 8:30, 152 South.
Thank you. Representative Wassinger.
Joint Administrative Rules and Regs is still having their meeting in 218 North at the conclusion of the floor. Thank you.
Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we have a ranking meeting immediately upon adjournment. We'll do what we can in the time that we have. 582 North, lunch will be served.
Representative Droege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. A rural caucus will meet immediately after we're done here in 281 North. Thank you.
Representative Bueller.
Social Services Budget Committee, we will have a quick meeting today at the regular time, 3:30 and 152 South. Thank you.
Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to remind everybody one more time before I submit the resolution for the KC-46 Pegasus. I think I got about everybody that I could, but if I miss you, I apologize. The resolution will be on my desk right here in the House for one more day. And if you'd like, you could also send me an email. We can coordinate that with the revisers. I appreciate everybody's support so far. And if they have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
One final announcement from myself. The Jostens, the company that makes rings for we have them coming in tomorrow. They will be here from 11 to 1:30. You can go get measured and potentially purchase a legislative ring if you'd like. I'll be sending out a form that they sent to me, and you'll be able to see the pricing for that if that's something that you wish to purchase. The Speaker recognizes the Majority Leader for a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Thursday, February 6th at 11 a.m.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.